Thank you. Deep gratitude. I want to thank the organizers for including me. I also want to thank the generosity of thought. And in honor of this Loophole of Retreat convening in 2022, I share from my biography as a dissident writer currently living in exile, an ex-prisoner and ex-convict who served time for writing a poem, and a radical queer African feminist producer of insurgent knowledge. I offer some considerations of possibilities. How does this work? Okay, possibilities of reclaiming freedom for creativity and critique while in exile, imprisoned, marooned, displaced, torn away from one's roots. My name is Stella Nyanzi. I have been living with my 3 teenage children in a 2-bedroom apartment in the city of Munich since January 2022, when I fled from my home country through the facilitation of a scholarship from the Writers in Exile program of Penn, Germany. In spite of numerous attempts by misogynistic apologists of dictator Museveni's repressive, militant, authoritarian regime to dismiss, discredit, and deny the facts, I insist on self-identifying as a political exile because I fled from political persecution, including numerous arrests and police detention, prosecution, imprisonment, torture during detention leading to the miscarriage of my pregnancy while I was a prisoner, unjust exclusion from my employment at the oldest public university in my country called Makerere University, being slapped with a travel ban when my name was put on the widely dreaded no-fly list. Also an application by state prosecutors to subject me to involuntary mental examination, several raids on my home while my children were watching or waiting or sleeping, the trailing of our family car, even as it ferried my children to and from school, the freezing of my bank accounts, among other forms of targeted persecution. Yes, I am still a dissident poet, a dissident professor, a dissident protester, and a dissident political animal in spite of the political persecution I have underlined. Prior to starting my temporary exile in Germany, in 2021, last year, I lived with my 3 children in Nairobi, Kenya, where we briefly applied for asylum. Now, why would a well-meaning Black African mother twice disrupt the lives of her 3 children by respectfully and respectively fleeing to seek for asylum and later fleeing to exile as a persecuted writer? Why? What dire desperation would drive a mother to dislocate, disgorge, displace, distant, and remove her children from the assumed safety and security of home? Well, my deep desire for freedom did not allow me to remain shackled by the repression, suppression, and oppression engulfing Uganda, my home country. My free speech, free expression, freedom of thought, freedom of conscience, academic freedom, freedom to write and freedom to criticize abusive state and institutional power had first made me an endangered species in Uganda. Safeguarding my sovereignty, my autonomy, and security necessitated quick flight and exodus from all that I held dear. I was arrested, charged, tried, prosecuted, found guilty, convicted, and sentenced to 18 months in maximum security prison because of a poem, a work of creativity, a birthday poem I wrote for dictator Yoweri Museveni in 2018. Charged with cyber harassment and offensive communication against the president, I spent a total of 475 days, including the end of 2018, all of 2019, and the beginning of 2020 as a political prisoner of conscience, locked up in maximum security prison. Not only am I the only Ugandan to be twice charged with the same crime of writing deemed to be offensive to the president and or his family, but I was also the first Ugandan woman to be charged under the famous, infamous Computer Misuse Act. Earlier in 2017, I was abducted from a private vehicle by gun-wielding men, held incommunicado for 4 days, and later arraigned in court, where my Facebook post metaphorically calling dictator Museveni a pair of buttocks was deemed a form of cyber harassment and offensive communication. Yes, you may laugh, but they did not. I was remanded to maximum security prison, where I spent 33 days and was subsequently released on bail. The state attempted to subject me to forced mental exam during this trial. In the misogynistic state's logic, a woman must first fall mad in order to criticize the president with mere poetry. For a mere poem and a mere Facebook post, Museveni's dictatorship unleashed the whole arsenal of judicial and penal structures of punishment upon me. Alas, a lone woman's creativity shook authoritarian military might to the core. So if state penalization was aimed at curtailing and terminating my freedom of expression, my defiant desire for free expression on my own terms failed the dictatorship's logic. While I was punished with imprisonment for 475 days for one poem, when I was a prisoner of conscience, I wrote several poems that were frequently smuggled out of my maximum security prison, and I published them into a book, which I entitled No Roses from My Mouth, Poems from Prison. Thank you very much. My desire and my practice of freedom to create and critique overrode and overpowered the painful penalization of prosecution and prison. This deep desire for freedom transformed prison into my own loophole of retreat, a productive place for writing new poems published to coincide with my acquittal and release on appeal to the High Court. Although several of my poems were confiscated and destroyed with fire by prison wardresses in my presence, the transgressive publication of 194 fresh poems when imprisoned because of just one poem was an outright act of radically rude resistance against repressive silencing by a punitive militant dictator. Poetry, creativity won against their guns. So if prison was a productive place and posture pregnant with poetry, how much more exile today? In 2021, while living hidden in a safe protection house on the outskirts of Nairobi City, I penned the bulk of poems that went into my second book collection of poems called Don't Come in My Mouth, poems that rattled Uganda, nothing sexual, all political. To the fresh poems focused on the hopelessness of post-elections Uganda, I added older poems I had previously posted on my social media platforms, including the poem for which I served 475 days in maximum security prison. The poem, Yoweri, Yesterday, They Say It Was Your Birthday. So the sources of creativity are ample even when torn away from home. This year, 2022, when faced with exile, the painful frustration of Russia's invasion of Ukraine, and the lifting of COVID-19 lockdowns, I appropriated the death of an enabler of dictator Museveni to write a book of 57 poems for his 57 years on earth, which was published as Eulogies of My Mouth, Poems for a Poisoned Uganda. Continuing in the ageless anti-colonial tradition of radical rudeness, I subverted custom and cultural mores by dancing for joy at the news of death of a notable leader of influence and power. Thus, I wrote protest poetry, inviting others to join the poetic protest. In exile, they will not imprison me for this. Similar to Harriet Jacobs, who wrote while marooned, hidden away and removed from the safety of home, I have written, composed, compiled, and published creative critique of power at diverse levels of the life that I observe and live in. This is my right. I refuse to be silenced. I remain rebellious. Currently, I'm working on 2 writing projects. One entitled Smoking Gun from My Mouth. No, I don't smoke. To be published by my former publisher. And the other, a compilation of 475 poems to mark each of the 475 days I spent imprisoned at Luzira Women Prison because of a birthday poem written for dictator Museveni. I will write what was too dangerous to write while still at home. Exile, too, has some benefits. Living in Germany has suddenly led to an estrangement from a ready audience, mainly because of language. I don't speak German. I am fortunate, however, that through my belonging to a fellowship of other persecuted writers in exile, PEN Germany creates opportunities for my creative works to be included with German translations into edited volumes of poetry anthologies and a poetry photo exhibition. I show pictures of my children, pictures I would never be able to show at home because of security. Common themes these days for me are about motherhood, failed motherhood, cross-border friendships, love in exile, the loneliness of freedom, and the quest for healing unseen wounds of political brutality. Although my themes evolve, my defiant dissidence persists. In my quest for freedom to create and produce critique and commentary, even when I am exiled from home, it is wonderful that I can draw from a line of genealogies of strong Black African women who continued their creative productions critical of oppressive power when they were themselves marooned and displaced from their homes. Harriet Jacobs is a newly discovered ancestor, thanks to the thinkers of this loophole of retreat. I found her. Regaining, reclaiming, and consciously practicing my freedom of critical expression during imprisonment, asylum, and exile has echoes of fashioning sovereignty during maroonage, a praxis handed down to us by Harriet Jacobs during her own loophole of retreat in the crawl space in which she lived for 7 years after her escape from slavery. I am Black, I am African, I am woman, I am in exile, I am a creative and a dissident. I was a creative dissident even when I was in maximum security prison. However, I'm neither special nor unique because there is a whole genealogy of exiled and or imprisoned Black women who continued their creative productions and dissident criticism while in exile, prison, marooned, and thus I ride on the big shoulders of Winnie Mandela, Busia Bena, Miriam Makeba, Nina Simone, Nawal El Saadawi, Wangari Maathai. In African Ubuntu philosophy, we say, I am because we are, and we are because I am. Just as these dissident creatives are my ancestors, I want to be an ancestor of future dissident creatives who will find anchoring and sanity when they see echoes of my defiant resistance and refusal enacted through creative production, even when marooned, imprisoned, exiled, and removed from home. Not just removed, but torn from home. The aspiration to become an ancestor of future dissident creatives pushes me on in my quest to reclaim my freedom for creative critique in exile. Thank you very much.